Eh, oh well. Um, so hopefully, first of all, I have a new microphone. Now I should sound a lot better than I have in previous weeks. I have an actual podcast microphone. This is great. I think the audio that's happening on the stream seemed good to me. I'm pretty sure I heard Phill on there also. Um,
Wait, you can hear me?
yes, I can.
All
And
right.
then the nice watching the stream live, I have a little delay, so I actually get to check a few seconds later. Anyway, yeah. So first things first, I have here a cup of tea, which I have let sit for a little while. It might be a little overly tannic, which will be an interesting
Ooh.
segue to today's topics.
I've got a nice cold can of Coca-Cola because, as my coworkers joke, I have a Coca-Cola problem,
Well, there you go. At least you're not
which
splashing
is,
water on your face whenever you fly in a plane.
yeah.
Wonder if anyone gets
All
that
right.
reference in the audience. I know some people who might be in the audience who may have gotten that reference. I believe it was an airplane reference, if I'm not mistaken, or
Yes.
another similar movie from that time. So I mentioned overly tannic tea, and I'm gonna have to get used to because the microphone is not following me around anymore, as on my headset. I'm gonna get real quiet if I back way off the mic. So I'm gonna have to remember to mostly try to speak in this relative proximity. So today, the title of the podcast, Is Your Whiskey Over Oaked? Is a relatively last minute topic change. I wanted to bring it up because I feel this topic, as well as a few other topics, seem to keep coming up recently in the Whiskey Lodge and a few other places. Um, and I thought that without having to really get too technical about it, we can talk as whiskey enjoyers about what over oaked means. Um, so to first of all, to demonstrate, I'm going to pour something which, in certain circumstances, might be considered over oaked.
And I will do the same.
And so that I don't have to single anybody out, I will actually pour a whiskey of my own creation, you might say. I have aged Wild Turkey 101 in a 2-liter cask for an additional 3 months. That cask was previously not used, so that is a really high surface area to volume ratio, which means that that char inside of that new 2-liter cask is gonna. By the way, I put it back into the Wild Turkey 101 bottle.
So I
That cask.
also
Oh yeah,
won't
go ahead.
say any names.
Sorry.
I also won't say any names out loud.
No, sorry, I missed it.
I just held the bottle in front of the camera while I poured.
Okay, I just wasn't looking, so I didn't see it. I missed the joke, if there was a joke.
Uh,
Never mind.
I
Go
was
ahead. Yeah. Uh,
uh, I, I grabbed Jim Beam Devil's Cut, which is sort of, everyone's familiar with the angel share, which is that which evaporates into the air. Um, but the devil's cut is apparently what remains in the barrels after they're decanted into whatever vat they use to then proof and then bottle it. And Jim Beam figured out a way to get that out of the staves. I don't know how. I'm a little bit afraid to ask. I assume it has something to do with pressure vessels,
if I
but I
had
don't
to
know.
guess, that probably a good guess. If I had to guess, I think that they might do what is called sweating, the process of sweating the staves, which, if I'm not mistaken, basically means manipulating the temperature and humidity of the environment in which those barrel staves are sitting to get them to let go of whatever moisture, whatever whiskey they're still holding on to. And so this actually is a pretty good example of something which might cause something to be over oaked. So let's, I guess, real quickly define what we mean when we say over oaked. Typically, over oaked is considered a bad thing, is a subjective bad judgment of a whiskey, which is to say that it's usually an opinion. I would say it's always an opinion. It's subjective.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, it is saying that the wood influence on whatever it is that you're drinking has um, taken over the flavor profile in a bad way. Maybe it has too much of the oak flavor, too much tannic, or too much of the barrel char flavor, and you've lost the subtlety of more delicate aging, or you've lost the subtlety of the spirit. So it becomes like people will say, like licking a barrel or like licking a desk. I think was one choice comment, or biting into a 2x4, all these sorts of things that have to do with like
Mhm.
you really feel like the dominant experience you're having with the whiskey is wood instead of what you would generally hope for, a more subtle balance. By the way, I was giving my glass a funny look because since that whiskey did come out of a new charred cask, 2 liter cask, and I didn't filter it on the way out, and that bottle that I was pouring from has gotten low, I have little fragments of barrel char in this glass, which is actually kind of a fun thing. The trouble with that is if you get a little piece of charcoal in your mouth, even these tiny little pieces, you will get a real zap of charcoal flavor, and that is rather unpleasant. Um, so that's why I think it's fair to say that this example of a whiskey here that I've picked is a good example of an over oaked whiskey in a certain context.
Barrel Schlager.
Barrel Schlager?
Yeah. Goldschlager is a peppermint schnapps with gold bits in it.
Hmm.
So
Okay. A little obscure from my experience, but yes, I recognize that. Um, so yeah, I would say from tasting it, it's been a while. The dominant flavor profile that I have gotten from this, first of all, 3 months in that barrel completely took over the profile. It almost does not resemble wild turkey anymore. Uh, I would not consider this particular whiskey in and out of my barrel a success, but that wasn't the point. The point was to put a relatively inexpensive whiskey in the barrel and take it out after enough of the raw barrel flavor and the char flavors have been extracted from the barrel. And in that sense, it was a success. I essentially de-seasoned the barrel, if that makes sense. I took the edge off because what I really wanted to do with this barrel was to give interesting finishes to things without over oaking them. That was actually the whole point. And so the fact that this whiskey in my hand is what I would consider to be over oaked is actually not a terrible thing. It is extremely tannic, even though I've taken a sip probably 30 seconds now. It's burning the inside of my throat still from that sort of barrel bitter tannic thing. Um, it is mostly wood. I kind of get like a maple syrup vibe from it a lot of the time, but I don't get a lot of like the fruity complexity you'd expect to get from like a wild turkey. That sort of toasted orange peel, the caramel, those sorts of flavors are gone. This is mostly oak, a little bit of maple syrup. Like it's overall, if you go into it expecting an over oaked whiskey, it's overall not unpleasant, but it is a little bit challenging to the palate. It's a little harsh on the palate. So in this context, I would say over-oaked, and that's what I mean by that. Over-oaked is one of those words where you pretty much always want to say more about what you mean because it can mean so many different things. And I'm trying to be precise here about what I mean in this particular whiskey, why I feel it's over-oaked. Another thing that can happen, and did happen to me in a previous time, about a year ago actually. I guess today's a wild turkey day. I have this pick of Russell's Reserve. This was the R Bourbon single barrel selection called Dirty K from Warehouse K. This is a great bourbon. I've had it a few times. Not very often. Typically, I lean towards Scotch and American single malt, so I just don't visit my bourbons all that often. Um, but this one, good bourbon in the right context. If you go in like really good, if you go in wanting like a real sweet, kind of spicy, um, like a powerful bourbon, this really does the job. The problem was I had spent an evening drinking Springbank 10 with my friend. And then I said, "Hey, I got this cool new whiskey, this Wild Turkey barrel pick. I love Wild Turkey. I know that you like bourbon now and then. Why don't we try it?" And we opened it up, and the only thing we could taste was oak. And I had tasted it before that, so I knew that this wasn't the best representation. It's just a funny thing that happens with your palate. Sometimes you get acclimated to one kind of thing, and then you throw a complete 180 at it, and the most different thing, that aggressive expression of oak, is the kind of the only thing you notice, and it was not a great way to close the night. So there's an art to choosing the order that you drink things in, and my thought process on that one was start from the delicate Scotch, go into the punchy bourbon because it's not going to work the other way around. It turns out it doesn't work in that direction either. It's just hard to build a flight around a delicate Scotch and a punchy bourbon. They are so different from each other that the contrast is just not going to be great no matter what you do.
So, my pick, the Devil's Cut, is probably Jim Beam's most gimmicky thing. And Beam isn't, generally speaking, a distillery that trades on gimmick. Um, and it is, I think, mostly sold to people who go, "Oh, Devil, cool." It's got like a slightly different label. You've got the white label, the black label, even the rye is just a basically just a green label that says Jim Beam Rye on it. Um, and it is, as someone who likes Beam, not a good representation of the style. It is, it lacks that light nutty note that offsets the tannic low end, as it were, that cuts through a little bit, and it is replaced with sort of a mid-range, mid-palate, which means that it you taste it all over your mouth, burning, bitter tannic that seems to like have an almost drying sensation in your mouth, which is one of the things that I experience with particularly tannic whiskeys is that it has an almost drying feeling in the mouth and in the throat. And it's it's an aggressive experience. It drinks hot, it dries the mouth, and if you go into it expecting sort of the standard BM profile of, light nuttiness over like dusty, dark flavors, then you just get that like, you know, mid mid-range bump of just bitter tannic drying sensation. It will turn you off. The first time that I had Devil's Cut, I mean, I had a little 50 milliliter sample bottle, and it lasted me almost a year because I poured it once, went, oh, that's not great, finished the glass, and then never came back to it. Um, but heavy oak influence isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, I have been told that this is horribly over oaked, which isn't surprising because it's 12 years old, but I rather enjoy it. I think that it's a relatively well-rounded, if tannic, whiskey. The Old
For
Forester
those
1910.
you just held up and said this. For those who are listening, what was that you just held up?
Oh, sorry. That is the Old Forester Birthday Bourbon from 2021. It's the 12-year-old Old Forester release. Um, and then the other this that I held up is the Old Forester 1910, which is from their Whiskey Row series. It's uh, aged for a time and then put into fresh charred oak casks for a secondary aging. And it is a a real ripper of a whiskey. It's relatively high proof. Actually, no, it's not. It's only 93. Wow. Huh. But it's relatively brash, aggressive, and oaky. And if that's what you're looking for, it's a really enjoyable dram. But for whatever reason, Devil's Cut, which is not aged for an extended period of time, but somehow has that like mouth drying, uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, that looks like a mouth drying, uncomfortable experience.
And It also doesn't help if you have like a little cut on your lip from eating potato chips.
Mm. You know, I've actually, funny enough, whiskey has always been good for my diet. Whenever I start planning, like, I'm going to review this whiskey or I'm planning on having a drink whenever, I can't have the chips because I'm going to cut my mouth. Um, I don't want to have dessert or anything else that is going to conflict with the whiskey. So I end up cutting snacks and dessert on a day where I'm planning on critically tasting anything. And believe it or not, the pounds just melt off. Imagine that
Yeah,
if you
I
cut
uh,
snacks and desserts.
I have no such self-control.
Well, it depends on how good I want my palate to be because there's some days where I'm like, well, I know I'm going to have that whiskey and I'm not planning on reviewing it or anything like that. I just want to enjoy playing. For a while, it was Breath of the Wild recently, getting ready for Tears of the
Mm,
Kingdom. Now it's Tears of the Kingdom. I'm going to pour a whiskey. I don't really care what it is. I also want to have a snack. It's fine. You know, snacks and whiskey
yeah,
pairing is actually a thing. It's not a thing that I've explored too terribly much that I feel like I've been particularly successful or unsuccessful. I don't really have advice to give, but you should play
maybe
around.
we should work on that.
We should. Maybe we should do it. We should plan an episode. Let's do some homework. That feels like a do some homework kind of topic. Um, anyway, yeah, on the note of overoaked, the reason that we're talking about this is because I've seen in a few places on the internet and most recently in the Whiskey Lodge today, no less. What does it mean for a whiskey to be overoaked? And I actually asked that question to Joe O'Sullivan last week. I'll edit that podcast audio at some point. It was really kind of a rough conversation. We were just messing around tasting some stuff, so it's not exactly interview quality. We'll see. But there
That makes it more fun.
might be some good sound bites in there. Um, so I'll see what I can pull out of that. We are going to have him on the podcast at some point too, also, so we can rehash some of these. But anyway, there was sort of we were tasting something, and our first impression was, oh, that might be too oaky. That might be over oaked. We started talking about what does it actually mean to be over oaked, um, and it basically like just as a clarification from the perspective of a producer, I'm asking like, do you feel that over oaked is a objective quality? Like there's some kind of thing that happens, some note that develops at some point that suddenly your whiskey or your spirit is over oaked and there's nothing you can do about it and it's just a bad whiskey now? Or is it kind of a subjective thing that creeps up on you where, it's gradually getting more and more oaky and at some point you say, this is enough, it's balanced, and if you let it go too much longer, it's going to be over oaked, and over oaked is an opinion. And the answer is more the latter, right? Overoaked is a subjective uh, opinion about what the producer wants to produce, what the drinker wants to drink. It depends on what your tastes are. It depends on what you're going for as a producer. Um, and sure, it is going to. I mean, if you say something like, "Oh, this is too peaty, it's overoaked," that doesn't make any sense because the peat is not coming from the wood unless you're using a peated cask and the spirit itself is not peated. But leave that edge case aside. If you have a peated spirit, too peaty is not an over-oaked kind of note. The over-oaked notes have to come from the oak. These would be things like vanilla, like way too much vanilla to the point where it tastes like vanilla extract. If you ever just like licked the spoon of vanilla extract after you've made a cake, it is not pleasant. It doesn't taste anything like the vanilla flavor that ends up in your baked goods. But your whiskey can taste like that. That would be over oaked, in my opinion. You could have things that literally taste like wood, taste like oak, biting a 2x4, licking a desk. These sorts of flavors. Wood glue is one that I get, and various chemical interactions in the cask. There are flavors that come from the cask. When those flavors become too powerful that they ruin the balance of the drink, in whatever that opinion is, whatever person's opinion that happens to be, that's when it's over oaked. It's something that happens slowly. It's usually avoidable by the producer if they are testing their products periodically. They're going to notice before that happens and they're going to not release an over oaked whiskey. The other thing you can do, and I should mention, while we were having this conversation, we were also sipping on the thing which we at first thought might be over oaked and realized, actually, no, this is great. Like, it's like maybe a little bit too much wood, but it's not over oaked. It's savable. Let's mix something a little bit younger back into that and see how that does. And it turns out like, yep, just a little bit less age on that, or blending it together with something that's a little bit younger pretty much fixes that problem. You can balance out oak flavors. So that's definitely something you can do too. It's not a flawed flavor. It's just too much, and it's usually fixable. Um, so anyway, we've gone talking about overoaked for pretty much longer than I had really intended. Um, we have a couple of other items on the agenda. We may have said all we need to say about overoaked for the moment.
Yeah.
Um, I think we should leave TCA for another day. I think we should talk about the other topics we had on the agenda.
Yes. Uh, shall we talk about new distilleries?
Yeah. Yeah, please do. I don't know anything about this, so this will be a surprise to me.
So, a member of the Whiskey Lodge mentioned that they were friends with somebody who was trying to get something going somewhere, and quickly deleted their their comments and said, "Oh, I don't know if that's public knowledge yet." And it turns out, timing wise, perfect because looking at the numbers or the dates, the post dates, uh, they released it a whole day, put out the press release a whole day before he mentioned it, which is probably why it was on the top of his mind. Um, uh, Brave New Spirits, uh, that's the other computer. Brave New Spirits, which is a independent bottler and blender, has announced plans for a new single malt whiskey distillery in Campbelltown, which is really cool because Campbelltown used to be sort of considered the heart of the Scotch whiskey distilling industry and has been sort of struggling to keep enough distilleries open more recently to be an independent region within Scotland because there are standards for how many active distilleries you have to be considered your own region. Um, like, for example, the association does not recognize islands as an independent uh, region and instead considers it an element of Highland, which you can get into an argument on the pros and cons of that at a later date. Um, but there are a bunch of projects sort of in the works, both speculatively and uh, sort of released publicly at this point, for new distilleries in Campbelltown to revive the spirit of the region. And one of them, Witchburn Distillery, will be located between Campbelltown Airport and, oh boy, uh, that village is spelled Machrianish.
Hang on.
And I'm,
I feel like we need a slide. I think I could go ahead and just project this article from the whiskey business.
oh, yes.
Sorry, the spirits business.
I think that there are two very similarly named industry news organizations. But
Let me see if I
it's
can. I think that might be all I can do in terms of. Let me just check that this is actually so Witchburn Distillery
yep,
at what was the
uh, Macrahanish or Macrahanish,
okay,
something like
yeah,
that.
the former RAF Macrahanish Air Base.
Yes. There are a couple of other cool things about this distillery, in my opinion. One of them being that they're aiming to be a net zero carbon distillery, which is pretty cool. We want to reduce the amount of carbon footprint that the industry takes up, um, just because that will allow us to continue producing whiskey for longer. Um, and they expect to produce about 2 million liters of alcohol per year, which is nothing to scoff at for like a really new distillery. A lot of places start out with a much lower production and then sort of work up to higher and higher numbers by adding stills. And they're going for. 2 million annual liters right off the bat.
This
Um,
is pretty big news to me, actually. First of all, it's cool that we have somebody in the lodge who knows somebody who's building the fourth Campbelltown distillery operating right now,
mhm.
and also that that's increasing the number of distilleries in Campbelltown by 33%. That's pretty great, especially because demand for Campbelltown whiskey has been kind of insane lately. You've got
Mhm.
you've got Springbank, which also makes Hazelburn and Longrow, and Kilkerran, which is operated by the same people who operate Springbank in like their off hours. Basically, it's a passion
Mhm.
project, slightly different profile. And then you have Glen Scotia, and Glen Scotia is good too, but it's kind of like the one that nobody talks about because it's not Springbank or Springbank associated. So if you want Campbelltown and you don't want to hunt for it, Glen Scotia is usually the way to go. It's also not cheap.
Yes. The other thing that is sort of from an enthusiast standpoint is a lot of people view sort of the Springbank uh, style as the style of Campbelltown, and Glen Scotia is slightly different. And so there are some people who insist that it isn't truly the Campbelltown style. And I would counter, do they produce whiskey in Campbelltown? And they contribute to the overall style of whiskey of the region. Just saying.
I agree with that. I also think it's worth the historical context that there used to be a lot more Campbelltown distilleries than there are now.
Oh yeah.
And so, what is the Campbelltown style pre-modern era where Springbank dominates the style? And also generally raises the question of in modern times when ideas can be shared worldwide instantaneously and people are creating what they want to create to the greatest level of interest or whatever artistic choices they want to make. Is there really how much does the idea of regional styles really affect what people are making and what people are buying these days? I don't know if we've talked about this too much before. It'll be really interesting to see how it pans out in American single malt, for example, with 200 plus distilleries that all kind of came into existence in the last 20 to 30 years, producing things from what they know from world whiskey production and
And
producing things that have a sense of place. Sure, where you are matters. We've talked about that a little bit. Um,
yes,
so one of the things that affects flavor is just the climate, year-round climate, temperature swings, humidity, and so on. Uh, but with no real regional lock-in, right? Like even Texas whiskey, right? We say Texas whiskey has a regional style. Will Texas American single malt necessarily have the same regional style? There's a climate influence, sure. I would say the Pacific Northwest has four quite notable distilleries that have very, very different styles despite the similarity of the climate.
that is a really good point. And then you've got the people like the folks at Yellowstone who are doing all new charred white oak casks. And some distilleries don't want to do that. And will that become sort of a defining stylistic element of a certain region, or maybe just a handful of distillers? You, we don't know yet because that hasn't been developed.
Yeah, this was actually a really nice piece of news. I remembered seeing that going by and saying, "Oh, that could be worth talking about." But then I saw the thing about not sure if that's public yet, and I figured we would hold off. But I didn't see
Yeah,
the confirmation this was public knowledge, so that's cool.
I went through and I actually checked timestamp on the posts and the date of the original release, and the original release was prior to his first post about it. So we're all clear on that.
Great.
Um, and there's an article about Witchburn Distillery, and that's really cool. Uh, Also, interestingly, their at Witchburn, their master distiller there is formerly from Glenkinchie, Strathmill, and Borders Distillery, which is kind of cool because like these are fairly different distilleries, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a resume. Run that by me again, and I assume that was not the same person or not all at the same time.
Uh, Most notably founding master distiller Andrew Nairn, who previously worked at Glenkinchie, Strathmill, and Borders Distillery.
Okay,
So
so
that is one person at those three distilleries, presumably at different times. But Glenkinchie and Strathmill are both fairly big names.
hold on a sec.
Yep. Shall I continue talking about stuff?
Yeah, please do. I just need to go
Um,
close my door.
yep. Uh, that's like kind of another element of what makes sort of a blurring of the borders between the various uh, regional styles in Scotland is you've got people like Mr. Nairn, who previously worked at Glenkinchie, which is a lowland distillery, and Strathmill, which I believe is Speyside, but I'd have to Google that to make double sure. Um, and those have different regional styles. And how much will he bring from Strathmill or Glenkinchie to what he's doing at Campbelltown, which I think will probably uh, be an element of what becomes, you know, Witchburn's style, because there's you replicate what you have learned and what you produce. You see it a lot in woodworking, for example. Someone who's learned from a certain style or a certain teacher will carry through elements of that style into their own work. And I imagine that's true pretty much everywhere. It's true with music. And I think that it'd be really interesting to like sort of put some of their first stuff side by side um, with other uh, with other Campbelltown malts and with malts from Glenkinchie and Strathmill. Um, Looks like uh, interesting. Okay, so looks like Strathmill is Speyside, which isn't surprising. Speyside is one of the more dense whiskey regions, and frequently is sort of discussed as being an element of the Highland whiskey stylistically. But there's a fairly narrow difference between Speyside and the Highland region, because Speyside is basically just the area around the River Spey, whereas Highland is a good portion of mainland Scotland. So there will be distilleries sort of in the in-between area, between or near uh, sort of where Speyside begins and Highlands ends, that will have sort of a style of both, or maybe one or the other, but not where uh, a lot of people would draw the line. And that's why, like, the discussion of what makes a regional style sort of an interesting discussion, because there's only so much difference between some of these regions. What will be the defining difference between, say, Virginia single malt and Kentucky single malt? They're right next to each other, similar climates. And for example, the Appalachian Mountains pass through uh, basically from Georgia to Maine, and there are distilleries throughout, and they don't all produce the same style. And geographically, some people would be tempted to call that. a stylistic region because it's sort of a separate area. Um, but it's sort of an interesting, you know, just building of a region, and it makes me wonder if there are more Campbelltown distilleries, and there are more in the works. Some of which are more of a vague, oh, we're thinking about building a distillery. Um, but there's a boom in small distilling in Scotland and in the US, and I can't wait to see all the styles of stuff that they produce. Um, and I will take this opportunity while Doug is otherwise occupied
Oh no, I'm back.
to. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I was just letting you soliloquy. It was very good.
I was I was sort of just rambling for a moment.
I forgot that you can't see me on the Discord call because I'm letting OBS use my webcam and Discord messes with that. Sorry, I should have announced
Ah,
myself.
that's okay. I was about to take the opportunity while you were away to talk about the Virginia Whiskey Tournament.
Please do.
So I'm running the Virginia Whiskey Tournament on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Bigger and better than last year with more distilleries because there are three new whiskey producing distilleries in the Commonwealth of Virginia, one of which is owned by Devil's Backbone, and one of which is owned or operated by Bold Rock, which is kind of cool. Um, and it's sort of, it's just me running it, but it's kind of a big deal for me because I get to interact with a lot of distillers and I get to see the communities that they've built interact with each other through the lens of talking about why they think that you should vote for their favorite distillers. And last year, uh, a small new distillery came out of nowhere with a really strong community driven effort to win. And this year we're doing it bigger and better and hoping for interesting results. Um, I'm going to be running the first poll from the 5th of June, starting on the 5th of June. It's going to be two polls with four distilleries each. And they're going to be running for a week. And you guys will get to vote on Twitter and on Facebook because I still haven't figured out how to do that on YouTube or Instagram yet. And you guys get to advocate for your favorite distillers. You can take a look and see the breadth and depth of craft in Virginia distilling. And uh, at the end of the tournament, which is going to be in mid-September, you get to see who has won, who gets to call themselves the 2023 Virginia Whiskey Champion. I haven't got the trophy yet. I'm working on procuring a stave from last year's champion, which will create um, the the dais, as it were, for the beautiful Jefferson Cup, because Jefferson is from Virginia, engraved with Virginia Whiskey Champion 2023.
I,
And
I really should have asked you for a slide so that I could have something up while you were talking about this. But I am currently
That's okay.
projecting. I think per your comment about how do we do this on YouTube, YouTube has a community channel, has a community tab on YouTube channels now. And I
Ooh,
believe one of the things you can do with that, I think I've seen some creators doing this, is you can actually post a community poll there.
huh,
So I think we can work on trying to get that together. As far as
yes.
involving people on YouTube, another thing you can do, assuming that you introduce each bracket with a video, is to ask in the comments for people to vote. That might work.
Yes.
I have a question for you, Phil.
Yes.
Are you going to be tasting or discussing the whiskeys from each entry in the brackets early on, midway through, anything like that?
So, just in terms of procuring it, 44 distilleries is a lot. I do have whiskey from a number of them, but I don't have whiskey from all of them. I'm working on that though. Um, the first round, I don't believe I will have whiskey in time for all of the entrants. Um, but I'm going to
That's a
do my
lot to taste
best.
too, unless you were to split it up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It'll be much easier in the second round. Um, but I'm also going to do my best to meet and get pictures with the people who make the whiskey. For example, this not this coming weekend, but next weekend is the Virginia Spirits Expo in Charlottesville, and I will be there. Trying to get pictures with the people who make Virginia craft spirits, and also trying a bunch of stuff because I'm going to be able to go talk to these people and try the spirits they produce, and that's really exciting to me. Um, and I might end up handing over the trophy to the winner at the next one. Just a quiet little handoff, um, because that one is at the end of September, up in Northern Virginia.
Oh, okay. So it's not an annual thing. It's a couple times a year.
Yeah,
Nice.
and it's a cool. The people who organize the Virginia Spirits Expo people are the name that their company has is Drink Local, and that is certainly an ethos that I can get behind.
Nice. Yeah, I want to tag on. I've been trying not to, just because of audio sync issues. We've been trying not to interrupt each other, which ruins a little bit the organic reaction thing. Last week when you talked about the Virginia Whiskey Tournament, I forgot it was happening, and I had, I think, a great reaction from a content perspective of like, wow, that was fun last year. I'm actually, so I want to repeat that now. The Virginia Whiskey Tournament was so much fun. I certainly have heard of a handful of the entrants in the bracket last year. And as a result of that tournament, I've heard of everyone who was in that bracket last year and got a chance to see their supporters come out and vote on them. And it was just I mostly participated on Twitter personally. It was like kind of a great way to meet and engage with a lot of the whiskey community on Twitter. Um, and not to mention the distilleries themselves, especially once they realized what was happening and that this was like no small thing. You had hundreds, I think even thousands of votes on the last the semifinals and the finals in your bracket because everyone had kind of figured out, oh, this is happening, and people are coming out of the woodwork and really trying to win this thing. And um, if I remember right, you did hand off the trophy to the
Yes.
distiller, to Falls Church Distilling Company. Do I have that right?
Falls Church Distillers.
Falls Church Distillers. You went to visit them in person, I believe, and they
Yes.
were cutting a red tape on something.
They had just moved facilities to their new location in Manassas because, a myriad of reasons, but mostly for space. They've got a much larger space now. And they invited me to the ribbon cutting for their new facility, which was an immense honor. And I got to say a few words about the community that they were building and how cool it was to see such a new company that was producing such good whiskey and building such a strong community that they would go toe to toe with honestly giants in the craft distilling space, Catoctin Creek, Virginia Distilling Company, and the not so craft A. Smith Bowman because they're still a Virginia distillery. I can't not include them.
Yep. And a
And
personal
Copper
favorite of mine,
Fox.
yeah, Copper Fox with the American single malt.
I mean, really big names in craft distilling. I mean, Copper Fox has been around for a long time. Catoctin Creek since 2008 or 2009, I think. I mean, and more new distilleries every year, and I think it's a cool opportunity to sort of showcase what my home state is capable of.
I think it's a lot of fun. I admire the work that you put into that. If only I had the free time, I wish I could do something similar. but I think one of us running a tournament at once is more than enough. We'll see what we can do in the future.
Well, and hopefully, I can make some connections to people and have them come and talk to us here about what they do, because that's sort of my end goal, is to get to meet these people and talk to them and sort of learn about what they do from them, because nobody knows what they do better than they do. That was
Absolutely.
really redundant.
No, you're completely right though. I feel like that was very well put. Um, one of the reasons that we love talking to distillers and interviewing them and having them on the podcast, um, we have some people queued up. Uh, just a matter of scheduling. Is that there's really no one better to hear it from than the people themselves, and we try our best to be enjoyable personalities. But the people who are making all of this happen are the producers, and a lot of them are wonderful people that are really worth talking to and meeting, or at least hearing from.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to get this started, uh, to get the polls started, and talk up some of the fantastic folks who are doing great work here in Virginia. I am also actually this year going to be emailing the distilleries on the week that their poll goes live, to be like, hey, by the way, this is a thing that I'm doing. Because last year when I started, I was not sure that it was going to work at all. Um, and then a couple of distilleries picked up on what I was doing early on, and it got bigger than I expected, a lot faster than I expected.
There was definitely an element of realizing you're in a race to start racing.
Yes,
It'll be interesting to see what happens when people are out in full force right from the beginning.
yes, I can't wait. I can't wait.
All right, I want to wrap this up now because I
Yes,
have an early stop time today. First of all, I want to bring it back to what I poured earlier. I have this Wild Turkey 101 finished for an extra 3 months in a new oak cask, a small 2 liter cask, which I consider to be over oaked in most circumstances. And I have here in the stemmed Glencairn, uh, the what was it? The Russell's Reserve, the Russell's Reserve Dirty K, which in the context of drinking Springbank all night and then switching over to this came across as over oaked. I felt it would be a very interesting thing to put these two things next to each other because this idea of over oaked, um, in two completely different things, in two completely different contexts, I will say putting these next to each other is really interesting. It really the Russells really highlights the maple syrup notes in the Wild Turkey finished for 3 months, which improves this that was over oaked, right? But also this over oaked whiskey really highlights like uh a soup like a I've been trying to come up with a tasting note, but it's like a really creamy cake, like
hmm.
a maybe like a tres leches cake kind of note to this, which is like that caramel and that sort of like vanilla cake and that like delicious like fatty sugary dripping sauce, like, you know, like I said, this is
Yeah,
a good
yeah.
whiskey, and the only reason that I thought it was over oaked was just because that's all I could taste after having tasted scotch all night. And that contrast is really interesting to me. And seeing this contrast also is really interesting to me. Um, which, this is a great opportunity to point out. I think you should do this all the time. You should have two different whiskeys that are either very similar or very different, and have them both and taste them side by side, because that's the best way to learn what things taste like. It's the best way to develop your taste vocabulary, figure out what you like and what you don't like. By if you don't know how to put tasting notes to whiskey, just taking a sip of one, take a sip of the other. Ooh, that's like graham crackers now. Like that immediate contrast of the two things and just saying how are they different is the best way to learn how to taste whiskey. That's how I think a lot of us learned how to do it. Um, and it
Yep.
really can help you appreciate something that you're not sure about in a completely different way. What do you have there, Phil?
So this is that Old Forester birthday bourbon, and because I drank all the Jim Beam, and then when I was talking about regional differences, I poured myself some of the Yellowstone single malt. This is Yellowstone single malt, which I
That's
hate
a
to
brand new
say,
American single malt, or just new to you?
I believe it's just about brand new. BAABC tends to get things a little bit slower than some other states, but this is something that they announced earlier this year. Um, I think I I feel like maybe last month or the month before. And I hate to sound like, oh, uh, uh like a snob or someone who can just go, oh yes, that's exactly what I think it is. This smells like Yellowstone to me. Their bourbon has a very like dried grass hay note that I've only found on a couple of things and most prominently on that, and it's definitely present in here. And after having my nose in that, sticking my nose in the Old Forester, it smells like caramel, just straight up caramel. The good stuff too, with like a little bit of salt.
And that's a big difference from what you were tasting before?
Yeah, because mostly what I got from it before was sort of that um like smoky, or not smoky, but sort of like cold embers and sawdust and and just like a block of wood, in the presence of some like shiny grain notes and like coffee and caramel and that sort of thing. Whereas, and granted, this is just on the nose. Difference between these two is this comes off almost pure caramel.
Well, all right. I feel like it's kind of a given, but between the two things that you have, which is your favorite right now in the contrast?
Mm, hard to say.
Really?
It really is because they're very different. It's sort of a different tools for different jobs sort of thing. The single malt is a very light, um, like delicious, easy to sip and contemplate dram, and the Old Forester comes looking for you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that you were currently side by siding the Yellowstone and the Devil's Cut.
Oh no, I don't.
Okay,
I
my
I drank
mistake.
all the Devil's Cut.
Okay, so you've got the birthday bourbon versus the Yellowstone. Okay, that's more fair.
Yeah, yeah, much more fair.
Okay, well, for lack of a winner, I will say, for me, my own Wild Turkey 101 finished an extra 3 months, and my own 2 liter oak barrel has a soft spot in my heart, but it is mostly good in old fashions and on the rocks. And between these two Wild Turkey expressions, in a sense, uh, they're both based on Wild Turkey anyway. The Russell's Reserve Dirty K Special is definitely my favorite whiskey between the two of these. And so on that note, I think we should cheers and sign off. So I was asking you to pick your favorite to cheers me.
Oh yes,
Oh, there you go. What do you got?
this is the birthday bourbon.
Was it arbitrary, or did you pick a favorite?
It's what I had in my hand,
Fair enough. Okay. Well, it's been great talking to you as ever, Phil.
as always.
Have a great night. Sláinte.
Sláinte.